Okay, we'll call to order the work session ahead of the Parks and Recreation meeting. Starting at 6 o'clock. Work session is specifically called to talk about park funding and current options that are being discussed with staff.
So I'm going to load up the presentation that we used to have the conversation with the City Commission recently. So it's the same deck. The request from this group was to come together to further vet out the funding issues and to be able to discuss a little bit more, add a little bit more time, knowing that the last conversation was a little bit short. So I'm going to load the projector for us. So on the slide deck that we're going to have an opportunity to use to further the conversation, if you would like, I can go through it very briefly just to kind of refresh as a group, and then we can open up conversation, or we can just go with the conversation if you kind of remember generally what you want to discuss, and then I can go refer back to the slides as requested by the group.
Is there any preference by members? No. Okay. That sounds fine. Okay. So again, really quickly going through, so the City Commission goal number 2, addressing critical facility needs. So we have a 2-point approach. We have a need for ongoing funding for operations, as well as a second need for capital reinvestment or deferred maintenance backlog. Department overview, we have 36 parks and facilities. Department structure, myself as the director of the department, assistant director, and then the 2 areas that we're really focusing on is facility maintenance, which falls underneath our assistant director, Denise Conrad, and then park and cemetery operations, which falls under our operations manager, Jonathan Waverly. So we have 6 full-time park maintenance specialists. As we've discussed previously, we have a gap in what we currently have for FTE and what the national average is. We would need, in essence, 16 FTE to align with the median agencies nationally, and we have about 8.5 FTE for park maintenance staff. On the facilities end.
Can we ask questions along the way?
Yeah.
So on this one, rather than going out and coming back, when you're able to pull up those numbers of what the NRPA study is, do they break it down by state then? And are you able to see what the state of Oregon's averages are compared to ours? And if so, what do those look like?
I would have to go back and double check. I know regionally, kind of anecdotally, I've had conversations with other agencies and where they fit compared to where we fit. Like Oswego, not that they're a direct comp, but as an example, they have 20 FTE full-time positions and bring on 15 FTE. 15 set positions for their seasonal parks, whereas we bring on 5 seasonals, and we have 6 full-time. So West Linn has a couple more on both sides than we do.
I asked this just from a standpoint, like, for example, if we were going to go to a bond, I'm not sure the average citizen's going to want to look at the numbers from this. They're going to want to see what are our
regionally.
Yeah, what are our counterparts doing? So it just adds, to me, it adds more validity, even if the numbers are the same, to enhance it by knowing what those numbers are.
Yep.
It probably doesn't change my opinion, but I think it reinforces the concern.
Okay, good point.
And what did you say about West Linn?
They have a couple more FTE on their side than
So they're under the average too, then, is what I'm hearing?
They are, yeah.
And they have a couple more seasonals.
I think they bring on something like 10 seasonals, so they have quite a few more seasonal positions, but they have a couple more FTE for full-time.
Do they have as many parks or nearly the?
Similar acreage, less parks.
Really?
Yeah.
They have Mary Young Park too, right?
Yeah, they have a couple of large park facilities.
They
Yeah.
get funded by the state.
Marietta Young's a state
Yeah.
park.
It's a joint.
Oh, it is?
It's a
Yeah.
joint, yeah, it's
My
managed
understanding.
locally.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So I'm not sure what the full agreement is
Yeah.
with the state for that
I just
management.
assumed with state park signs, it was out of their hands.
Yeah. On the facility side, we have 1.5 FTE for all of our facilities.
I caught this the first time. You might want to reword it. We don't rent the mausoleum.
We don't rent.
You mean the
Oh.
open space?
Yeah, what they consider rentable square footage.
We prefer
Yeah.
permanent residents.
It's an industry standard, but yes, point is well made. So we have, again, the industry standard being 1 FTE per 47,000 square feet of rentable square feet. Oregon City would require 3 additional FTE to meet the minimum maintenance levels for that. We have, and again, our 1.5 FTE, we have a half-time position assigned to the pool, and then we have 1 full-time position that's assigned to basically every other facility in our city, including both parks and recreation facilities as well as other departments. So City Hall, the library, Public Works, police.
Is that probably the number one need? Like, if you looked at the whole list,
It's pretty staggering that we only have one
yeah.
person assigned to all of those facilities for them to be able to keep up not only with the preventative but the ongoing. Yeah. So looking at our overall operations needs, again, our deficits on both sides, park maintenance, were about 7.5 FTE deficient, and on the facility side, about 3.3 FTE deficient.
You know, I have a comment. To Sean's point, it would be nice, I don't know how much work this is, but to update these rather than the industry standard, might be the county standard or the tri-county standard, because where the numbers are the numbers, I don't know if the industry standard of 16 really helps us much in this area. Because it would take into consideration other climates, which could be much worse and have greater need,
Yeah.
or more mild climates, which are going to be pretty lean.
Yeah.
Or economic.
Or economic as well. So there's a lot of things that might skew these numbers, but and I don't know if that's going to make it look any better or worse, but it'd be
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, we can try to pull some. I think the other, it was a study that was conducted versus us calling or trying to research each individual agency regionally, which does take, the staff time to try to hunt all those numbers down. And there are factors to consider as well when you're looking at these, as Bill would know, when you're managing different locations and the onloading and offloading of equipment to each location. We have a lot of parks comparatively. When you look at Lake Oswego, which actually has more acreage, but they have I think like 12 or 15 parks total within their system. So when you're like physically at a site and you can be there and you know that you have the equipment needs that you have versus offloading, mowing a pocket park and then loading back on. So there's things to consider in the type of maintenance that's done as well.
How about this maybe as an alternative between that? Like what you have and what I originally suggested is, what's the staff recommendation? I mean, in other words, show the industry standard is 16, but instead of saying the deficit is just the basic math, as the department head, do you, obviously you would want 7.5 and that's what you could push for, but are we going to be a sustainable department at 5.25?
Yeah.
What's your call,
Yeah.
if you will?
That's a good point. And I would say with that, having done for so long without, it's difficult to kind of think of what that would look like when you're talking to staff. But that is a good point where, I think the recommendation as we were making that recommendation moving forward was adding somewhere in that 6 FTE positions was the staff recommendation, not needing to get all the way up to the median, but to try to bridge that gap in some way. Also looking at our growth and needing to add, we're going to have additional properties at the Cove, the Willamette Falls project. We are deficient in many areas in our city that we should be acquiring property, and we've talked about acquisition and how to do that in a sustainable way. So it's going to be an ongoing issue. I'm probably trying to get to a method of recognizing a standard that we should try to keep in an acre per FTE, so that as we're adding park space, we can continue to have that conversation with PRAC and with the commission. So moving on to our facilities, our parks and open spaces. A few photos of our current conditions. Identifying the capital needs deferred maintenance backlog. So again, we have approximately 23.5 million in parks deferred maintenance, and we have 3.9 million in facilities deferred maintenance for our $27.4 million total deferred maintenance. We attempt to break it down into just easily digestible chunks of costs that you can look at and kind of acknowledge what those areas are. So playgrounds, 3.1 million. Walking trails, 3.3 million, parking lots and roads, 2.8, structures, looking at shelters and restroom facilities of 2 million, and then other 11.2 million.
Let's talk about the other. We
Yeah.
definitely didn't get to talk about that, and I heard some comments about like plumbing related infrastructure underground.
Yeah. So irrigation,
Okay.
storm system management, some of the cemetery items that we didn't want to include in structures. So like the mausoleums that need attention, roofs.
Are those buckets comparable to the ones above? I mean, are they that big? Yeah.
That's a good question. I didn't vet that out.
The reason I ask is I think if you're going to try to sell a bond issue or something like that, if I saw 11.2 million, I'd want to know what it is.
Oh yeah. Well, I think if we, the request to bring back was, what is our need, and let's start this conversation. And so staff, as far as direction, to spend the time digging into the weeds and not knowing if the commission would even want to move forward with additional conversations, we didn't really, if we were ever to move forward with publicly and go after, a funding mechanism, we would definitely vet out, identify projects, make sure that we have marketing materials in place that make sense, that are digestible.
Did you include lighting in here? Under other or under walking trails?
That would be, lighting would be in there as well. This is just our deferred maintenance. So this is just looking at current lighting needs. So if we have current lighting that would need to be repaired or replaced, it is listed. It's like lighting on the promenade is listed. Lighting at the cemetery is listed. But lighting at facilities, I know like Atkinson as an example, was not listed as a lighting because it's currently
That is something you might think about breaking out, though. I think a lot of people, the public, would be interested. That's a safety issue that a lot of people
That's a good point.
would want to know about, and support issues that would encourage more lighting in our parks.
As I look at this number, I think to myself, when I look at statistics, graphs, pie charts, anything, the other is usually 10 to 15%. This is 50.
Oh yeah.
And so even for our discussions now, and I get your point of, when we deliver to the public, they're going to want more information, but we want more information because as I look at this, not that these don't matter, they certainly do matter. At the same time, playgrounds, walking trails, that's the whole purpose of the park, and so those are important. But if in other includes safety and security and infrastructure, those are what makes the others work.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think it would be helpful to break some of the bigger items out and until that other is about 10% of the total versus 50% of the total.
You know,
Because infrastructure is a huge deal, and I would argue the infrastructure is a bigger priority than the playground, because without the infrastructure, you have no playground.
but we're
Right.
looking at a slide. The spreadsheet had everything broken out.
Yeah. And
Okay.
and
This
we
is
can go
just what
through and,
fits on a slide.
Okay, fair enough. Then we could just update the slide to include what's on the spreadsheet.
yeah. So I can go in and if it's, knowing that we're going to have another conversation with the, with the city commission coming up on November 13th, I can try to, within the next week or so, put together, try to break it down further for you and send it out.
think it'd be
through
helpful.
email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be easier for them to defend the analysis here if they had a smaller, more itemized
Bigger slide, smaller print.
to cover other.
Well, and in all fairness, these being televised, the public is seeing this right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're gonna, looking at home, watching this, which I know millions do.
Yes.
Oh,
They
yeah.
tune into Parks and Rec meetings, but when they sit at home and they look at these, it's only fair to, I think, provide that information to them as well.
Well, and I hope that the discussion, not only between us, but helps you vet the next step. One of the things that you said that kind of stuck out to me is stormwater. Shouldn't all those things be offloaded to Public Works, who has a much more stable budget?
And they do assist in some projects, but yeah, a lot of it because it falls on park property.
When it's in a development, it gets dumped back to them, not the HOA.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue that some of those things need to be operated by one department, because that department is well versed in how they work, and it defends your budget for these things.
Well, it provides for more efficiencies to it.
Yeah. I mean, that just stood out as something
Yeah.
that maybe we should be realigning that.
It's a good point.
And would fencing be under the other category? We could break that out as far as fences that we currently have and
Yep.
maintain or want to replace.
Correct. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so I can vet that out a little bit more and send out an update email to the group just so that you have that information as we're moving forward. So looking at facilities, deferred maintenance backlog, Oregon City Pool, about $500,000, Pioneer Center, about 400,000, End of the Oregon Trail, 2.9 million, and the Ermitinger House, current deferred maintenance is 0, although it's, again, newly refurbished and will begin to accrue some deferred maintenance issues as we move forward.
I think the one thing that he's pointed out here is, and please take this back to Rochelle, is that number shocked me on the pool because that's low. And that's not the numbers Bill and I used to see.
Oh, yeah.
15 years ago, that number was 3 times that much, or 4 times, and yet we're newer in inflation and the numbers shrunk. So
Yeah.
that's just
They've gotten a lot
stunning.
done.
Yeah, the commission's put a lot of investment into the pool, which shows.
And staff has.
Yeah. We've advocated, definitely.
At the end of the Oregon Trail, kind of what are some of the highlights that make up that 3 million?
So the picture to the right is it's a little bit hard to tell, but holes in the siding. So we have birds that that peck away at the siding and then use it for habitat. So they,
Wow.
yeah. So
So the picture.
the shell. So every hole you kind of see there on the right hand side, those 3 in the middle of the picture. Those are all holes that birds actually burrow into and end up, in some cases, in the inside of the museum and flying around.
Starlings.
You can see also the paint on the hoops, which is the right hand side of that, or left hand side, as it were, of that.
Does that
photo.
include the canopy?
That does not include the
Really?
replacement of the canopy. Yeah.
Well, I bet it's not have any more.
But it does include the shell. It does include mechanical systems, the HVAC units, some of the ADA improvements. I believe we actually left the parking lot and approaches, all of that in the End of the Oregon Trail capital needs, as opposed to putting it in the parks capital needs. So pretty much anything that falls under in that facility would be in the End of the Oregon Trail on the facility side. I believe we put some irrigation and some fence needs on the park side.
I believe there's also some huge settling issues, is that correct, on the south side of that building? And they're going to
Correct.
have to be doing some extensive reinforcement on that. There's cracking showing
Yeah.
up in the,
The Henderson building on the backside has some cracking and separation. Some engineering work needs to happen. It's currently usable, but we're monitoring it and is definitely of concern. Roofing, pretty much anything that you could list off that would be needed is needed at that facility. So going into funding options, general fund support, as we spoke about, there's about a 65 cent per thousand that we're under on our permanent tax rate limit. So the commission, as we go through the budget cycle, would have the option of using part of up to all of that 65 cents to repurpose for general fund use, of which the Parks Department uses general fund support. The general obligation bond, GO bond, again, some of the recent bonds that have passed locally in Eugene, Portland, Bend, Lamb GO bonds can be used for capital, cannot be used for ongoing operation and maintenance. Local option levy, as we discussed, primarily looking at the 10-year capital levy option, but you can also use them for a local option levy for operations. Eugene just passed a 5-year local option levy for operations in addition to a bond at the same time. So both the operation side and the capital side. Park utility fee. So a fee paid on the regular utility bills specific to parks. This does not require a vote of the people in order to happen, but as we discussed in our meeting or last work session, there already are a couple of utility fees on the books, and it sounded like the commission and this group probably supported doing some type of public process to determine if this should move forward, if this is ultimately selected as a funding source.
Do you know, kind of putting you on the spot, but the city has done that survey recently. Do you know what the general consensus was on the park funding portion? Kind of like this, but
generally, yes.
was it favorable? And
So in the conversation on the 13th, we're gonna have those figures for the group. So we'll have our work session, and then right after that, the consultant's gonna be here to kind of speak to the survey and the results. But we will have the park specific funding ones that we can talk to for our joint work session. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, so I would be, I don't want to give. Right. But yes, we'll be discussing those shortly, so we will have those numbers for you.
Nice try. Yeah.
Park District, Special Park District, I know this came up, I believe Mike brought this up specifically. Again, Park District is only as good as its funding mechanisms, and so similarly to the city needing to identify capital funding or ongoing operational funding, if we were to move towards creating a Park District, they would also have to move towards getting public support to move forward with a bond or a levy or a permanent tax rate that would fully support the operation and maintenance of the park system.
you know, Springfield, for example, I noticed here, what year was that approximately that they started theirs? It's probably after they lost their lumber industry.
Yeah,
That was a depressed community. And so to get people that are willing to pay into a fund like that went the extra mile because there was a huge amount of unemployment.
Yeah.
And probably to some extent still is. I know they feed off a lot of Eugene, but I think that's something that we need to see how they maybe phrase that to the public to get that kind of a funding mechanism in place, because again, they're maybe in some ways they're similar to what we have here in terms of the demographics, or at least certainly income.
Well, and I will say definitely, I have no use for this.
You what, Karen?
Into the
I said, basically, I have no use for us looking at this. The drawbacks are probably 2,000 more than the positive. It's, I've looked a little more at districts, and I think we'd lose so much more than we would gain by going that way.
And there would be some challenges, particularly as, ramping up, starting up a district would be a process when you're creating a whole new government agency. And so getting the approvals, along the way, and getting the public vote, and then getting funding authority, taxing authority as a special district, and then, actually setting up what that looks like, setting up all of the policies, setting up all of the needs, figuring out where you're even going to be having, offices.
I think the areas that have done it and have been successful have been, they were desperate.
They were what, Chris?
They were desperate. I don't think they had much choice in setting something up. The ones I've looked at anyway. Just because of the economy or the support behind Parks and Rec were limited. So I think the areas that did it were good, but I don't think we're in that environment here.
Yeah, and there are positives and negatives. The one nice thing, I have worked for a special district, and so you are a separate agency. When you work with the city, even when I was in the Dalles and we worked very closely with the city, it's still a separate organization that you're dealing with. And I have counterparts in Tualatin Hills and Bend, Willamette Lane that have you have to build relationships with, the cities and the counties in a way that internally as a city, you already have those relationships built in. You're already in regular meetings, and it's easy to, move forward with joint goals that make sense. And so it is nice on the other side, though, that you don't have to worry about, what money you have is yours. So if there is a downturn in the economy, it's not, are we going to have public safety, or are we going to have parks? What is the choice going to be? So the park district, will probably have to tighten its belt, but it doesn't have to worry about shifting funds from other departments possibly. So there are positives and negatives. But again, you're only as good as your taxing authority, and only as good as the funds that you have coming in typically.
So let me put you on the spot, because we can. And I was going to ask you before you went this direction, because I knew where you worked. What's your opinion? Is this one feasible for our area? Could it be successful, more successful than the other options, or is it still last place?
I think we're far enough behind, and the process is far enough along that it makes a lot of sense to move forward in not moving forward with a park district, just because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of vetting and a lot of process. And we're already so far behind the 8 ball that it would be, it's going to be a heavy lift. Again, Tualatin Hills, Bend, Willamette Lane are all extremely successful, and they do fantastic work. If you go to their parks, they are in great shape. It's easy for them to, set a standard and tell a story and know that it's, very focused on the work that they're doing.
But it also took them some time to get their feet under them.
Yes, they're all well established, have been established for decades.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
So for the operation funding options, what we looked at again was we looked at the position allotment and what we would need in order to bring a certain number of folks on. The 700,000 annual was kind of the number that we looked at. That would be a permanent tax rate adjustment of roughly 25 cents per thousand, or $6.25 per month for the average household. The park utility fee came in a little lower at $4.15 per month. And the local option levy came in at the same rate as the permanent tax rate adjustment at $6.25 per month. And again, the park utility fee, because it hits every meter. So that's why you have the difference in the cost per household as opposed to the overall cost for the utility fee.
This one really surprised me. I just want to say that to everybody. I don't know if anybody else expected this difference.
Between which one?
Park
A
utility.
utility fee of any sort compared to the tax, doing a property tax. I just didn't know they would be that much different. And I've told several people since, coworkers that live in the Oregon City, just about this slide because this surprised me so much.
And a customer is considered a meter.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
So is that $415 per month?
Correct.
Which is essentially, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking a customer in each of these is going to be the same person, same building. Because if you're a renter, you don't, I guess if you're a renter, you have the meter.
If you're a renter,
This includes
But if
commercial.
you,
Churches,
I
commercial,
guarantee the
VFW.
county will pay it.
well, hang on, but on the tax rate, that doesn't affect the renter unless the owner passes it through to them. That's why I say essentially it's going to affect everybody. How do I say this? Not the same because the dollars are different, but I mean everyone participates in this regardless of which one. I guess the way to say that.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't know because your nonprofits don't participate in the,
Right.
anything, any church property, any VFW, those types of facilities, county facilities, government buildings,
They don't participate in the
they don't pay property taxes.
property tax.
Yeah,
So-
but they pay water
But
bills.
they all pay water bill.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I'm drawing myself a little graph here to be able to compare these. And I'd really like to see something consistent that we can count on, more than 5 years, more than 10 years. I'm looking at the revenue of $700,000 annually. That's a drop in the bucket compared to what we need.
Yeah.
And I kind of like the idea of the park utility fee, and I understand public perception is an issue, but I think with the proper relations campaign and outreach, it affects, everyone has skin in the game with it.
So with the police bond passing, would that public safety fee be coming off the utility bill at some point?
When the bond's paid off.
It's listed as a sunsetting date once it's repaid, and I don't recall the date off the top of my head, but I would assume 20, 25 years
20
out.
years.
That'd be more
I think.
palatable if that weren't on there, but.
We can't wait 20
Yeah,
years.
being the third one
Yeah, I
on
know.
the list. That's
Yeah.
tough.
So the nice thing with the utility fee is that it can be done in perpetuity. It is an identified use, so it's not a general. It's not a general allotment like the permanent tax rate adjustment. So if any of them could be adjusted by the commission at any given time, but the utility fee would be saved specifically for parks, similar to the current utility fee for street maintenance goes specifically to street maintenance. So it's a stable, ongoing, identified funding source versus if a permanent tax rate was selected and a new commission comes in, they could decide to shift, this budget, we're going to go ahead and shift these funds to this other thing instead of parks.
Yeah, I'm really leaning towards the utility fee.
Me too.
Is that a permanent fee? I mean, not permanent, is that rate permanent or is that adjustable by commission?
Oh, it's all adjustable.
It is,
That's going to be a question that some,
That would be
People would wanna know.
interesting if they insist on it being voter approved the first time.
it's to the discretion of the commission is my understanding. So if they decide to adjust the rate, they can adjust the rate.
And that's on the utility fee, right? That's what we're talking about.
Correct, yeah. Yep.
The tax rate adjustment, it doesn't change. It is what it is.
Tax rate adjustment, there's an allowable maximum. So our allowable maximum is somewhere in the $5 range, and I don't recall the permanent rate, but we are 65 cents under that allowable maximum. So each time they put together a budget, they have the discretion to be anywhere underneath that allowable maximum. If they were to want a larger permanent tax base, they would have to go to a vote of the people to establish a different tax rate.
But both the option levy and the tax rate, they both go into the general fund, right?
The option levy would be specific to parks, but it would have to be voted on by the public each time, each 5 years for operation or each 10 years for capital.
Can I clarify what I believe you're saying? Of all three, permanent tax rate is general fund. Park
Correct.
utility fee is general fund. Local option levy would have to be dedicated. Park utility fee would be general fund.
Dedicated.
Park utility fee is dedicated by their discretion, though. It's from a budgetary standpoint, it's general fund. And local option levy would be a separate fund.
It's my understanding the utility fee would be a dedicated.
It would be.
Dedicated, just like the road,
Yeah.
whatever we call it nowadays.
I think I would want to see that specifically stated.
The city of Portland uses that local option levy usually when they are asking for more money. This is what we've done so far. This is why we need it, and they spread it around through the entire city so that everybody's buying into a park or two in their area. And it's usually successful as long as it's a track record shows that the money's being spent as promised. So they don't have, usually, I don't know if they've lost one or not, but usually it'll go through every 5 years because the track record is such.
But that's also how we used to try to run the libraries and just about lost them.
Yeah, it's having to sell yourself every 5 years for, and Metro has they just passed another levy for the 19 to 24 cycle.
So this has probably been mentioned, but so I understand, local levy is, of course, 5 years. Park utility fee, how long does that last?
Forever.
Could be in perpetuity unless the commission sets a sunset date.
Okay, and then permanent tax rate is permanent.
Well, technically, it's every 2 years.
Yeah,
The tax rate?
Yeah, it'd just be like the school district. You know, you set that tax rate at the end of the budget cycle. And right now, they're just choosing not to exercise the full tax rate.
Right.
And so if you upped it by 25 cents of the 63 cents available, that's a biennial decision. Typically, it's going to continue because they never give money back. They never lower the rate, but
Did.
But they couldn't be continually raised every 2 years because they still have that cap within they,
Yeah.
with
correct.
they have to
Yeah,
work within.
they have an allowable maximum that they can't go past.
and I think it maybe is beneficial. Do you know why there's that gap, why we're not doing the full amount?
No, I don't know that story.
Fire.
Yeah, so years ago, the fire was paid out of the city budget, and then we annexed to the fire district, which would be similar to this Parks District type scenario. And so they said, we'll lower the city tax rate by the exact same amount. And so you can trust us, we won't re-up that, we won't adjust that rate back up for X amount of time.
5 years.
And thank you. I don't remember exactly. And so then at some point after that, they upped it 25 cents to
Yeah,
pay for
just nudge.
police after that initial agreed amount time. And so they haven't gone the full rate yet.
And so, so that time is, we can do that now.
Oh,
way
absolutely.
past
Yeah, all those deals are long done. Yeah. I mean, they could tax us the full amount. I think it's a political hot potato.
Yeah, but again.
But that
it can
number
be
doesn't
taken
change,
away
right?
in other
I
departments.
mean, once it's spent, once it's met, it's met, the cap, but
Yeah.
so they can't keep raising it, but they can
No,
raise it up to
they
that
could raise it up to that. They
point
could
at
do
any
it.
time.
They could do it at the next budget cycle, just at will. I mean, it would be politically troublesome, but they could do that.
So can we take a straw vote on this?
Sure, I'm in favor of the park utility fee.
Is there more information that we need to digest?
We can go through the other, I think the next slide is just the capital side. So looking at the capital funding options. So on the capital side, we talked about the local option levy for a capital levy is a 10-year instead of a 5-year and can only be used for capital funds. Again, looking at our total, we used our total deferred maintenance list, $27.4 million as the base point. So if we were to try to tackle that over a 10-year period, that would be roughly $24.50 per month per household over the 10-year period. If we're to do a general obligation bond, it would be $18.98 per month per household, and that's paying back over a 20-year period. The general obligation bonds, so the difference between the local option levy and the general obligation bonds is that the local option levy comes in as we're assessing taxes. So as we receive our tax revenues, that's when we receive the local option levy funds. General obligation bond, we're able to, again, sell off bonds and then be able to recoup that cost over the 20 years and spend. We could do a capital campaign over a couple year period and expend all of those funds over a 5-year period as opposed to over a 10-year period for a local option levy. The park utility fee would be, I guess, kind of similar to the local option levy, where we're receiving a certain dollar amount. Again, the 2.74 million. You're looking at what a 10-year kind of process would be, similar to the local option levy of every year you would receive, again, your utility fees as you're billing families and as they're paying into the fund. And so your funds are kind of ongoing, being paid in. And so you would set up projects over the years and accomplish them in kind of a process. So that would be $16.20 per month. Again, similarly to the operations utility fund that we discussed. It's a little bit cheaper than the other options, quite a bit cheaper than the local option levy, and even cheaper over a 10-year period than the 20-year payback for the general obligation bond.
Yeah, on this one, I like the GEO bond because the other two, you stand the risk of 10 more years of neglect before you get to a project.
Yeah.
The GEO bond, it's in your pocket. So I think definitely this one, the GEO bond, is a good fit.
I agree. That's what popped out to me. One and done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we get the money that we need. Yeah.
So you could possibly, or we could possibly, I guess, on whatever we decide to do here, but actually, for example, have a general obligation bond submitted and also have a park utility fee for the operation side of.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, similarly to the Eugene model that we kind of spoke to, that they passed at the same time a bond and an operational levy, so that the capital side for the bond and the local option levy for operations. Similarly, we could do a utility fee for operations and a bond for the capital needs.
I agree with your sentiments, but I was just paying attention again today at the school bond, and it's $1.24. And what stands out to me is $1.24 for schools versus 75 cents for a bunch of parks, and that's troublesome. And so I'm very curious to see the school bond and how that succeeds and with what kind of numbers before I think any of us can realize whether any of these are even a pipe dream.
Good point.
Yeah, I'm not. If we take pictures of the really, really horrible spots and advertise it well, because we've got some really, really.
I hadn't even thought about that until just now, but just today I was looking, what like my own bill calculator, and it's close. I mean, it's not like it's 30 cents.
Mm-hmm. That's because.
So how would that work with
maintenance.
getting the backlog of work done? If you were to get the 20-year bond, all your money in the pocket, would you, hire contractors and get the backlog level set and get it all done? And
so we would, again, I think it works hand in hand with the operations side. It's going to be additional staff time as well. Even though we would hire contractors and we would still need to do all of those processes of bringing on, doing the RFP, overseeing the project. But yeah, we would hire contractors, go through and have them start doing the work. So we, first off, even before going to a vote of the people, we would set, kind of project scope. So we would have an identified projects, these would be the projects that we would move forward. That would be message to the broader community, as you can, similarly to the school district, at your park, this is what you would see. This is the difference that it would make in your community. These are the other projects that we have identified. This is kind of the timeline of which we're anticipating being able to conduct the work. As we move forward, we would have to hire a project manager probably for managing all of the different projects. The $27 million worth of projects is going to take a lot of staff time, oversight, going through and then, the design work, the actual boots on the ground once the shovel's in the ground, that work that's happening.
You may know the answer, but I think you know the answer, Troy. It was something that came up on the school budgeting side that I'm going to state it and tell me if I'm correct. It's something along the lines of you only start getting charged the interest on the bond of what you draw. So, for example, if you were to make them in phases, you're only going to pay interest on the first phase, and you don't start. Okay,
That's correct, because it'll hit the market as it becomes a debt instrument.
Right. Okay.
The challenge I have, though, with the bond is, yes, there's some advantages to the financing piece. As far as when we're going to pay interest on it, we don't pay interest on $27.8 million the day it passes. But the challenges I have is, to your point, Sean, where with the school bond, and even if it passes well, and I expect that it will, is the city going to be ready for yet another bond? And even though the numbers will say, wow, they're in favor of a bond, that doesn't mean they're in favor of a second bond. That means they're in favor of that bond. And so we're not going to get a definitive answer at all, which is, what statistics do, is they don't give us anything definitive. They just give us a lot of stuff. And so there's no promise that's going to work. And I think the community might be, the money is the money. At the same time, if you say bond and there just was a bond, then it doesn't look as good. The other challenge I have is we get $27.4 million at one time. That's a huge expense to be able to spend that money in. I believe it's the 3-year period that we're required to start taking that money out.
Right. That's the number I was looking at.
And so we've got 3 years to spend $27.4 million, which we have enough projects to handle that, but I don't know if we have enough time and manpower to handle the spending of it. And if we go with the park utility fee, we get it in more manageable pieces, $2.74 million per year. And the other challenge I have is we have people that are going to be moving into the city. And they're going to come, if we were to spend that $27.4 million, let's say we got everything done within a 5-year period. They move in year 6, year 7, they come in these beautiful parks and they see nothing done to them for the next 15 years, or in their minds, nothing done. Right? Also, those of us that do live here, we see, wow, you spent all this money on these parks and nothing's been improved on year 6 or year 7 or year 8 or year 9. And I just wonder if doing a little bit each year keeps the excitement moving about the city is continually doing what they can do to our parks, because a little bit each year is happening.
I absolutely do not agree. And I'll tell you, you think you can't sell something. We're looking at $6 for operations and $16.20 to do dribs and drabs each year to do repairs. You're going to really hear about a $22 fee showing up on a bill.
Well, that was one of my.
Paper's only $5.
But Karen, that was only one of my objections. That was only one of my objections.
Well, but the other
I have
part
several
is
others that I think are valid as well.
If you approve, the voters approve the bonding. So in this case, they approve bonds up to $27.4 million. You don't have to sell a $27.4 million bond the first day.
Correct.
So you could get the money to come in over time and defer interest because you haven't borrowed as much of it. It's just in 20 years, the voters are approving you borrowing that amount of money.
Not exactly.
Yeah, that's the question
Not
I was
exactly.
leading to with him.
You've got deadlines you have to hit. Phil, you may know exact numbers on this, but you've got deadlines you have to hit. You can't just decide over a 20-year period when you're going to take your money.
Right.
You are forced to take it at certain times and therefore spend it or lose it.
Right.
But I think there's a 10-year something
After
in
going
there.
to, after selling it, to your point, and again, I'm by no means an expert on bond financing, but you do have to start,
Yeah.
Hopefully I will become an expert at bond financing.
As soon as possible.
But you do have a set period of time, which I believe is 3-year period after you sell the bonds to begin spending the bonds. To your point, I think you can sell off a certain portion of them over that time period. So you can sell like half of the bonds up front, start those projects, start that momentum, start spending on those bonds that were sold, and then have a secondary sell date for the remainder of the bonds once you have progress on those projects that are already under your belt. So I can find additional information on that and bring that back as part of the conversation for
I've sat through bond school
the
twice, but I
November
don't have the
13th
answer.
meeting. And just maybe even invite our finance director to be here to help hopefully answer some of those questions.
So if with the commission we decide on the bond, are we looking May or next November or an off election?
I think that's part of the conversation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're definitely, I think May would probably be too soon.
Yeah. So let's do a quick time check here. I want to give you guys a 5-minute break before our regular session. I wanted to ask a question on the FTE levels with these bonding or these funding options. Does that bring you up to your 11 FTE deficit?
So the recommendation, if we're looking at that $700,000 amount, that would be roughly 6 FTE positions. So we would recommend 1 FTE for facility maintenance and 5 FTE for parks. That would include all of their ancillary vehicles, equipment, tools that would be required for them to do their work.
So just want to voice my concern that might not, I mean, funding wise, that helps with the deficit number, but the manpower to maintain and get the work done, in the future, I don't know that gets you there.
Yeah, gets us closer for sure, but
Well, and I've got two
doesn't
questions
get
on
us to
that
the
topic.
number that we
really need.
discussed. Yeah.
But I have a companion question on the same topic. There's 2 things. Number 1, John had commented we haven't done comparatives on grave costs for a while. It might be time to look at, do we need to be raising fees? The other one is the upcoming budget is going to have the marijuana revenue in it, which the current budget has not. We'll now know how much that actually is. And I keep joking that at least half of it should come to parks because it's a tax on grass.
It's probably mostly used in the parks.
So it's true, we're trying to keep it out of our parks, but there's going to be an additional general fund money in the next biennial budget that hasn't been there before. And I don't have any idea how much that is we're collecting, but we could maybe conceivably, between raising fees and getting a little bit out of that, get one more staff person.
Not as much as you would
Not
think.
that good? Okay.
Yeah, but that is new money coming in. We also have systematically some additions. I think we're going to be paying a 5%, something like that, percentage difference in our PERS costs comparative to the last budget cycle. So that's an additional cost as well.
So only half joking here. Instead of a utility fee, how about taxing the grass? For parks.
We'd have to pay it.
Hey, you have to consider all options.
Okay, so we didn't hit a consensus yet on the funding for the 2, so we just
And
run a straw poll.
we can start again if you would like to continue just past the time. We don't have to start exactly at 7 for the regular meeting. We just can't start before 7 for the regular meeting. So if you'd like to take a couple more minutes to vet it out, we can. If you want to end and we can move on, that's fine as well.
So I got the information I was looking for. I would like to know what that sunset date is on the public safety fee and the utility bill is.
Yep, I can find that out.
And I think going back to Troy's and my comment about bonding, it would be important to know the time requirements with pulling money out, especially on a 20-year.
Yep.
Just a couple long-term.
Ready for a break? Okay. Take 5 minutes during this work session. Regular Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee meeting for October 25th. We'll start with introductions.
Bill Daniels.
Troy Bollinger.
Lisa Novak?
Chris Cook.
Sean Dashler.
Karen Moore.
Roger Politice.
Phil Lewis. And we have committee members Doug Neely and Mike Mitchell absent this evening.
Okay. First on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Any questions or amendments?
Nope.
Okay.
I move to accept the minutes as written.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, to,
Any opposed?
Oh, hang
you have to
on.
poll us, Phil.
Phil, for the minutes, do you have to pull us?
No, I have not been.
Okay.
good.
I probably should, but I assume unless there's an issue. Yep.
Okay. Citizen comments on issues and items not on the agenda this evening?
At this point, I don't have any general issues.
Okay.
Any public comment?
No presentations. And so we'll move right into general business. First topic is charter parks.
Great. So this evening, we're going to do a quick review of the charter park discussion that we had at the last meeting. We have a couple of new items to discuss and a couple of recommendations that I'll be asking from the group. And then we can also have general conversation. At this point, I don't have any public comments for this item, so we'll just move into the presentation. So as an overview, Chapter 10 of the Charter recognizes parks and natural beauty. So the purpose of the chapter is to, again, make sure that we have a nice park system that will be here for our citizens as well as citizens in future generations. The ways to, Section 41 has an approval by voters. So in order to do anything to a park that is not for park and recreation purposes, does have to go to a vote of the people. So we cannot sell, lease, or otherwise transfer park property or vacate or do anything with the park without going to a vote of the people. It does recognize in Section 42, 11 properties as charter parks. And then it has a Section 43, which outlines how we can acquire additional parks that will have the same protections as our charter parks. So a couple ways that can happen. It can be accepted as a gift by the commission. We can adopt it as an ordinance into the system. And that is primarily the way that we will be looking at how to identify parks as charter parks and having charter protections. Once they are recognized in any of those formats, they do have the same protections as the charter parks, which again is why we're going through the process of really cementing and adopting all of the parks as parks by ordinance so that they are easily recognizable as having those same protections. So to date, in 2003, of the parks that are not charter parks originally listed in the charter, we have designated parks by ordinance. So in 2003, we recognized Abernathy Creek and John Storm parks. In this September 2018, we recognized 10 additional parks to be recognized as parks by ordinance. And then we have our remaining 13 parks that need to be recognized as park by ordinance and receive that designation. At the last meeting, we reviewed several parks, of which we have 4 parks that are currently situated, ready to move forward to the commission on the November 7th commission date for adoption as a park by ordinance. That would be Kenema Slope, Pioneer Center, Stafford Park, and Straight Cemetery. 2 properties that we'll be reviewing today and are under consideration that I will be requesting a recommendation of this group for Mountain View Cemetery and Sportcraft Park. And then we have a couple of other facilities that still need to be vetted internally that this group has said that they would like to move forward, but we still need to refine a couple of things before we move them forward for adoption by the commission. Ermitinger House, Barkley Hills Park, and Old Kenema Park, and we'll go through the specific items on those in a couple of slides. So still to consider at upcoming meeting, McLaughlin Promenade, Oak Tree Park, and Singer Creek Park. And then the other property that we've already discussed, this group has asked to set aside and look at possibly selling the property to use for land acquisition in other areas that are park deficient, is Dement Park. And I can tell you with that piece, some of the research that we found is that there's currently no restrictions on that property. So it should be a property that, if deemed surplus, the city could at some point sell.
Thank you.
So properties that we'll be talking about tonight, Stafford Park. This was one of the ones we reviewed at the last meeting, and it's ready to go and will be moving forward at the November meeting. Kenema Slope Park, again, not a lot of need to move forward on anything with that. It very clear, and we'll move forward on the 7th. The Pioneer Center, we discussed again the additional parking areas, but we decided to move forward on the main property for adoption at the City Commission. Straight Cemetery, which will move forward. And now we're getting into the other properties. So the Ermatinger House, as we discussed, and decided to move forward with the lower kind of red area on that map is designated as park for the Ermatinger House. The section of property in the upper section is 2 separate tax lots. So the parking area again is an independent tax lot, and then the fire building is actually part of the same tax lot as the Ermatinger House currently. So we'll be working with planning to do tax lot adjustments and make sure that it is done in a correct way before doing the overlay for the charter park designation. Barkley Hills Park. So we had a lot of conversation over this property, very a detailed conversation. And so with this property, again, a lot of the conversation happened around the pump station compared to the park designation. There is a lot line there that was not immediately obvious when we first began researching the property. So the yellow circle that you see on the screen is generally the area that the pump station is located. And on the next slide, we'll see this is the plat map, which shows Tract C outlined there in yellow. The green property is the park properties. There is an approximate 12-foot sliver, which would be allowable as access onto the entire Tract Z. So it would have a 12-foot walkway, in essence, maintained for public access, as we discussed.
Great.
Old Kenema Park. So again, as we discussed, there's the issue with the little sliver of property, which is not immediately adjacent to the Old Kenema Park. It is considered part of the property. In conversations with Public Works, both Fifth Avenue as well as South End Road are both county right-of-ways, and so the conversation has been around the county absorbing the sliver of park, currently park property, into the right-of-way. They are open to that conversation, are currently working with our Public Works Department to do the background work on absorbing that sliver of property into their right-of-way. In conversations with our city attorney, they're comfortable with this process, and so we are kind of doing that legwork, and we'll bring back the charter park designation once that ancillary work is behind us and be a little bit cleaner going into the park designation. Sportcraft Landing. So we discussed this during our last meeting. There were some conversations and concerns about this property and what we're designating. I can tell you that it's a very complicated lot. I did go back and look at the title report, and there is some language in there in regards to access and a certain payback to the state if we are not using it for its current use for a ramp access. It was fairly minimal. If I'm remembering correctly, it was like $30,000 that we would have to pay back. But it was in the 60s when it originally, the agreement was made. Additionally, there were 2 Land and Water Conservation Fund uses on this property in the 60s and 70s, of which, as I spoke previously, when land and water conservation funds are used, typically there is a permanent requirement of in perpetuity the property be used as open space and have an easement for that purpose. I wasn't able to find the specific easement, but again, it is my understanding that that is typically a requirement, and that's kind of the direction that we've been going with this. So we would be seeking PRAC recommendation to move this forward, recognizing it as a charter park by ordinance, making that recommendation to the City Commission. And at this point, I would open up conversation and ask that we hopefully have a motion in that form be made.
So,
Go ahead.
question 1.
Yes.
What about the commercial use?
The commercial use was grandfathered in. As we discussed in the charter, we've had an ongoing lease agreement with the property owner since before it was acquired by the city. Our first, when we first acquired it, it actually had in the language that there is an ongoing lease that is required to be maintained through the life cycle of that lease, and it's continued consistently over the years.
And then the other question would be, conceivably, could this interfere with ODOT's plans?
No.
For sure.
They're already going to a vote of the people. They already recognize it. We already recognize it as having those similar protections. And this is just cementing and making it very clear that the city recognizes it as a park.
Let me ask you a question about if there was some consideration being given to the idea that this park could possibly be renamed. We know that it's named after a for-profit use, and possibly that could be considered as an extension of John Storm Park. If we were to go ahead and include this as a charter park tonight, would we be able to make that name change at a later date?
We would, yeah. Similarly to Abernethy Creek Park, when it was designated to have park protection by ordinance, it was listed as Peninsula Park, something in that realm. And Glen Oak Park and Filbert Run Park additionally have both been recognized as parks by ordinance, but just state that it's not the permanent name in the whereas statements.
And if Sportcraft no longer runs the business at some point in time, does the lease revert back to the city to reissue a new lease to a new vendor, or if in fact, how does that?
That's a good question. So that would be something for our attorney to probably vet through. But my understanding is that because it's already in place, it's been grandfathered in. I would assume that if we're no longer under contract with that group, that we probably would need to relook at it.
It's still the same family.
No, he's saying if in the future it became
If they
some
decide
other,
not to continue forward, if the city wanted to do a similar lease with someone else.
Some in the future. Okay.
Yeah.
Have to get the sea lions off the dock.
Well, I would make a motion, unless there's some other discussion, but we can have a discussion about approving all of these parks that we just reviewed. Certainly, do we want one at a time? Is that what we're asking for?
Yeah, one at a time. The other ones have already been voted on. So I have under discussion today that we need a recommendation. A motion would be for Sportcraft and for the Mountain View Cemetery. So for Sportcraft, if you'd like to make a motion, that would be fantastic.
So moved.
and I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded.
All those in favor?
Oh, we do need to do a vote.
He
Sorry.
did it the other way.
My apologies. Daniels.
Aye.
Ballinger.
Aye.
Novak.
Aye.
Cook.
Aye.
Dashler. Maury.
Aye.
Fowler Tice. Aye. And motion passes. Thank you very much. So the next property is Mountain View Cemetery. It's actually already recognized as a park by ordinance, ordinance number 011011, which was in 2001. The majority of the park was recognized as a park by ordinance. The one sliver of property that was not is right here, the 1 acre property that we recently acquired within the last year or so. So the request for this group would be to recognize everything that you see in green, which would include the majority of the cemetery, which is already recognized, as well as the 1 acre portion in the middle of that area, as recognizing it as a park by ordinance.
By the way, I've got the deed where it says no deed info.
Oh, you do? Fantastic.
I move that we include this piece and recognize it as charter park.
Right.
Is there a second?
Second.
And just one question.
Yes.
Conceivably, rebuilding the office is a park purpose. So making this a charter park isn't going to interfere with being able to replace that structure.
Correct. Yeah, we can, any property, anything that we build on parks land, if it's for recreational use or for maintaining the park's facilities, is an allowable use.
And what about a new mausoleum?
It's an allowable use.
For sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a motion and a second.
So we have motion and second. So taking roll. Daniels.
Aye.
Ballinger.
Aye.
Novak.
Aye.
Cook.
Aye.
Dashler.
Aye.
Maury.
Aye.
Fowler Tice.
Aye.
And motion passes. Thank you. That was great.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Buena Vista House.
Great. And we do have one public comment for the Buena Vista House. Information from staff at this point is that we have no additional new information, unfortunately. Bill did reach out to me earlier in the week to request, what information we'll be bringing forward on this topic. Given the construction boom that we've seen regionally, we have had firms come out and look at the property and said they were going to come back with estimates for us and have not returned estimates. We have other companies that we've reached out to that have passed, and we have other companies that wouldn't return our phone calls. So at this point, we only have 3 firms that have given us estimates on work that would be required to bring the house into a habitable use for a public facility. We had the 2 original ones that we put out and had some firms give bids on. We have one additional one based on the updated scope of work that the stakeholder group had put together. And I guess at this point, I'm probably looking for some direction from this group as to when I should bring those items forward if we continue to. I can't imagine that, given the amount of work that we've put into trying to get firms to respond, I would imagine that we will continue to not see responsive firms based on the not having a shovel-ready project and not having a identified budget. It's just difficult to get firms to come out and give estimates based on that background. So probably moving forward, and probably have the conversation after we receive the public comment, but would be asking for next steps. If you want me to just bring forward what we have, start that conversation so that we can then make some type of recommendation to the city commission. Or if you would like us to continue to hold out and wait and see if we can get other responsive bids so that we have more information to be able to inform our discussion.
Go ahead with the public comment.
Yeah, so for public comment, Denise McGriff.
Rocky Smith of the Buena Vista Clubhouse. Good evening, Denise McGriff, Oregon City, and I'm here representing myself and Todd Island, who could not be here tonight. He's out of town, but I would like to request that the city and the PRAC move forward with, if we can't get any, so I asked the question, who were the contractors that we contacted? Because I called a contractor yesterday to just talk about electrical service. He called me back today. He's willing to come out and take a look at the property because we want to just get the electricity hooked up. I don't want to come here again in December telling you that we're now going on year 4, that the building has been unheated and has had no electricity. The McLaughlin neighborhood has said that they would help contribute some funds toward this, and we are still willing to do that. I urge you to move forward at least getting electricity, which is the thing we have been asking for 3.5 years. That is what we would like to see. It needs it, and it needs it soon, because we're going into, even though the prognostication is from the weather people, which of course we all believe them, that we're going to have a mild winter, it still leaves it unheated. If we get some random weather that brings it down colder or warmer, it's still causing problems for the house. So I can discuss that with you, who the contractor is. It's a local contractor, somebody that has worked on older buildings, is very familiar with it, and at least let's get the electrical done soon. And that's all I have to say.
Let me ask you, Denise, there was an email from Todd Island that I received and forwarded to you.
Yes.
He's, like you say, he's out of town. And we could probably have perhaps another meeting. I won't take up any time tonight, but I think that he indicated that there might be the possibility if the city and or the neighborhood requested PGE to put in a meter base, they might just do it at no fee, no cost. And then we're talking about an electrician. The panel is still up on the building and serviceable, and so it's about putting the wires from the meter base to the panel. And that whole fee, at least Todd's estimate, was perhaps under $2,000.
So PGE can't put in a meter base?
I don't know if we've asked him yet.
We wouldn't, or PGE wouldn't, because it's customer-owned property. We only own, or PGE only owns the meter itself and the wires going into the masthead. So by regulatory constraint, they can't do that. Sorry, I've tried.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Tried to
considered
get
customer-owned property.
tried to get PGE to put in a meter base on something else?
Because it's considered customer-owned property, they can't do it.
Well, you can still get it put in though,
Yeah, I agree.
whether they own it or not, or whether, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yes, you're correct. That's Todd's estimate. And I said we have a local electrician who the city has actually worked with before. I've personally worked with them on my personal property. I've worked with them on a nonprofit's property. And like I said, I'd really like to work with Phil to get them over there within the next few days and have him take a look at it and get us some costs and move forward. I don't want to go through another winter without any heat there. Some heat.
Just a wild shot, Denise, you might reach out to PGE Foundation. That's their charitable arm. I'm not sure what kind of causes that they actually contribute to, but couldn't hurt to ask.
Well, this is a public thing, so yeah, it doesn't. What could they say? No? I mean, if you don't ask, then you don't know the answer. So I will do that. Do you have a contact?
I can get you one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Further discussion on Buena Vista House?
I agree with Denise.
So what are the funding means right now for that, Phil? I mean, how would we fund that work?
It's currently on our deferred maintenance list. I think the conversation that we've had to date is that we didn't want to throw good money at bad, as it were, and maybe that's an awful analogy for something of historic significance, but if it were the direction of this group and of the commission to not invest in the property, it seemed not worthwhile to do the work to start to get things moving and to then revert back and look at other means. And so we initiated the conversation with the stakeholder group to start to lay a process of what it would take to get the house open and usable. Part of that process was to, again, the city went after original, contacting firms and trying to get information back on what it would take to get the house back open for a public meeting space. Once we met with the stakeholder group, we did a refined scope of work based on the criteria that Todd Island put together. And we made contact with many firms and received one estimate back on that group. And I thought that it would make a lot of sense to have at least 2 bids on each of the scopes of work so that we could then start to have a conversation. The house, even though it has no heat currently, has not had significant damage due to not having heat. And it's obviously not ideal and not something that we would like to see happen for any longer than needs be. But given the information, given the progress that we've made, we were wanting to, again, have some direction from the commission before moving forward with expending funds.
So what is the house being used for?
It's currently red tagged. It's non-habitable.
So there's no really need for heat right now, is there?
The need would be to
further deteriation.
Keeps it drier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not currently habitable, and for its primary use, no, it does not require heat. But for maintaining the property, it's better to have a heat source.
But if we're going to do other work on that what you're saying is it might make sense to kind of do it all at once and not heat something.
Or if it was
or to hook up electricity, which may at some point the box may have to be moved, or other things may have to be done to go in line with the plan.
Yeah, so that's a consideration. Is the scope of work right now, it does not call for it to move locations, but I think our primary concern is to put money into a project that it's on the low end we're looking at in the 400,000-ish range, and the high end looking at the over $1 million range. And so knowing our deferred maintenance backlog and current inability to maintain facilities that are highly used, we're just trying to use the funds to the best of our ability as staff.
Where are the specs that you're sending to prospective bidders?
Todd Island drew up scope of work drawings, and we're using those drawings as the bid document, as it were, to receive estimates.
Okay, and then how are we publicizing that we're open for bids?
We're not open for bids, and so that's the problem. Is we are reaching out to firms that are likely to respond and that have done business in the community and that have done public projects before and can respond to this type of work. We can't do an RFP because we don't have money to expend. It wouldn't be, it wouldn't make sense for us to go through that process. But we are reaching out to firms to have them bid or give estimates.
Give estimates. Because Denise seems rather resourceful.
Sure. Well, we need more than just an electrician on the project for sure.
So we've heard about the Buena Vista House for several months continuously, and my opinion has changed. And I think it's important that after we saw the $27.5 million unfunded maintenance backlog, that I believe all work on this house, while it's important, should wait unless directed by the city commission. I think the time that you spend on it is starting to impact other projects, and those projects have funding. So to be wasting our time on something that has no funding, no direct goals, is troublesome. And that's not to say this couldn't be important, but I believe that the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and several of the volunteers, Rocky. I believe those, and Denise, I believe they're super resourceful, and through private groups, that's probably the best way to bring this house back. So my recommendation would be for you to do nothing unless commission or the city manager directs you to do so. And that would be because they've urged them as elected officials to prioritize it more appropriately. I think it's hard for you, if I was in your shoes, to keep picking at all the little bits and trying to make everybody happy, and we need to start focusing on the things that we're losing sight of, that are funded, that are still going by the wayside.
Does the one estimate you say you have, does that have details on costs and what will be done?
Yes, well.
So if we could identify a grant source, is there enough information in that to submit with a grant request?
Well, I think typically grants require matching funds.
Not necessarily.
And typically they do, but correct.
For government agencies,
not all do.
They do.
But so finding a $500,000, even on the light end, grant that does not require matching funds or does not require staff time, it's work, and it's.
No, I wasn't saying you would do the grant. I can do grants.
Yeah, no, I mean just managing
Is there
the
enough
public
detail,
process.
Though? Yeah.
There are construction drawings that he has put together. Again, and we can have, and that was part of the request of this group, is if, we can at least have that conversation as a group and decide if it makes sense to move it forward as a recommendation. Staff right now have, we work at the pleasure of the commission. And so if you make a recommendation to them and they decide to support saving the house and they allocate funds, or they say that, if there's a grant for such and such amount and we will match it, staff, we are fine moving in that direction. I will just say with the rather substantial deferred maintenance backlog, it is difficult to prioritize this above other deferred maintenance backlog items that have a higher user pool in our system. So it's just a difficult decision. I mean, and something that we could further that conversation. I was hoping to have additional information to share so that we could start that conversation. We just don't have that information. So we can start that conversation with not as much information, or we can continue. We're nearing the tail end of the really busy season for construction, and we might be able to find companies that would be more responsive during the winter months. But it's difficult when we don't have an identified budget or a shovel-ready project.
Well, I would like to say in response to Sean's conversation that there is a reason to save that house. And I think a lot of people in the community would agree with that. And what I think we could possibly, or I could possibly suggest in a motion, is that we at least, PRAC, be willing to take the position that if there's any private donations to at least get the power to the facility. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for the whole master plan to be done anytime soon, but certainly getting the power to that, whether it's in the form of heat and light, of course, and try to save that building while we still can. And that's kind of my position on it. I think we can find some, if it's in the $2,000 range, if PGE is willing to do some of the meter work for a nonprofit, I think that's something we should be exploring. So that's my position. And I would make that in the form of a motion if you'd like, but I think we should send that idea towards, and we may have a new city commission who have a whole different political view on what's important. And so that's not too far away either, is it? So I really think that it's important what Denise is talking about is getting some heat in there as soon as possible, whether we continue to heat it or not down the road because it's just simply not a high enough priority or we don't have the funding or whatever the reason is. But certainly right now we still have a chance to do something before we get a long, cold, wet winter come through again. So that'd be my position.
Mr. Chair, I have one little fact to add that I didn't bring up in my comment. May I just say one thing?
Sure.
I appreciate everybody's opinion, but I wanted to remind this group, we would not be in this position if the city staff had not taken the electricity and everything out of the building. We are here asking for something to be put back that should have never been taken out of the building to begin with. This is Phil's predecessor. Phil had nothing to do with it, but it is a city problem that they created themselves. We're just asking for restitution to get it back so that we can do the work. I'm willing to do the legwork. I've already had volunteered with Todd and to Phil that I would be happy to make calls. I know contractors myself. Obviously, I got one to call me back like that. I'm willing to do the legwork, whatever it takes to do it, to take the burden off of him. But again, we would not be in this position if the city had not acted prematurely. And I think the city owes it to this community to at least do one little thing so that we can work constructively to bring this house back. It's going to be in stages. It's not going to happen overnight. I've been working on the Ladderette Park thing with those folks. This is not an overnight thing. We know that. So again, I'm putting the blame where the blame belongs, not to you, not to him, but we're here because of some bad action.
So I don't think there's any harm in getting an estimate if all they're looking for right now is to get electricity restored. I don't think there's any harm in having a contractor go out there to see what that would take. I think unfortunately what we're going to find is it's a lot more work than people think in terms of electricity, because it's an older building. You're probably going to have to rewire the whole thing.
It has some knob and tube. I mean, it's an old building.
PG may choose not to hook up the lines. We can do all the work on our end, and they may choose not to hook up the lines.
PG would not hook it up unless it was safe, and
that's what I'm saying.
Permitted. Yeah.
They could choose not to hook it up after we've done all the legwork and the expense. You know, I'm kind of along the lines of Sean. I don't see the need to spend the time and resources. I completely disagree with Denise that the city owes this to the people. The city owes a lot of people a lot of things. That's what the city does. And to put this as a priority of what is owed to one individual or a group of individuals is it's an unfair statement. You know, we could have the argument of who owes who, and we'd never get out of this meeting. The truth of the matter is the money, as we saw with the deferred maintenance, is there's less coming in than is going out. And I think that is what is to consider. And so if private individuals, or even if McLaughlin Neighborhood Association wants to do some legwork on this, nail down some contractors, see what PG is willing to do, and all it takes is Phil maybe walking out there with a visit to hear the information, then I'm for that. Otherwise, put it on the list.
I think that was my point, is if they're willing to do that legwork, and have somebody come out and do an estimate for them at no cost, and get a scope of work for just the heat, then I don't see any harm in that.
I agree.
So I will say that early on in my time here, we did contact PGE, and they did say they would not come out to look at the site without us saying for sure we were going to put money into the property. We did have an electrical consultant, electrician, come out and look at the property, give us an estimate. I did share that with Denise and the stakeholders group. I'm trying to remember, it was somewhere in the 4,000-ish range. It also required us to substantially limb up one of the trees nearby. And we have that information. I can bring it forward as part of the conversation. But to Sean's point, we had the conversation earlier today of having one FTE for facilities in our entire city. So that means maintaining City Hall, maintaining the library, maintaining all of the other buildings that we have in our system, and even having her go out to meet an electrician is work that she can't do at one of our many other inhabitable facilities that are used regularly for 30,000 plus people per month, as opposed to a house that currently does not have a budget or direction to move forward. So that's where we're at. That's where staff have been positioned, and it's a difficult decision. And I don't like to tell people that we don't have time or resources to put into those things, but that's where we're at based on the resources that we do have.
Agreed. And if it was $4,000, that would be surprising to me that it's that low. But if that's all it is, I would say if McLaughlin Neighborhood Association can come up with that money or through other means, and they want to take on that burden, then I think we should let them and at least get the heat restored.
Well, and the stakeholders group was pretty much unanimous that the building is worth saving. I'm getting a sense that we're just letting time pass until it's hopeless.
I would agree.
And I don't like that.
I don't like that either, and that's why that's why we're having this conversation, is that, you know, I want to be transparent. I want folks to know where we're at in the process, and so we can have that conversation at the next meeting or the meeting after that, and I can bring forward all the information that we have to date. I just did not feel comfortable with only one responsive bid based on the scope of work to say that this is the bid and this is roughly the amount of money that it will cost, because I don't know that for sure based on one bid. Typically, we would get at least 3 bids, or we would go, again, if we have documents that we're using, we would do an RFP for construction work, which then we would know exactly how much it would be. But at this point, it's an estimate. So I would prefer to have at least 2 estimates, which I don't have.
And Karen, I agree with your point. I mean, I was there last month and the months before, but then sitting at home after that $27 figure hit me, it seemed like we can't have this conversation until we have the conversation with the entire priority list. It's not fair to keep moving one project or another that we keep just discussing. And oh, by the way, it got to the top of the list because we've just been discussing it. It seems like it's not fair to the other items that equal that $27 million. It's not fair to those if we just keep pushing this up. It seems like that bigger discussion needs to occur first. Now, that said, I totally agree with the heat, turning it on if there's some volunteer time and money. It also seems to me in some cases when you cut the ties, those other elements tend to step up. And so when the city finally decides to say, hey, we can't do anything right now, we may see those private elements step up. And I would like to see that. I would like to see it saved, but I'd like to see the people that care about it most work towards saving it.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything blocking the private entities from coming in and taking care of it?
No, I mean, we've had conversations as a stakeholder group around the different options that would be available for that house, some of which could be forming a 501c3 dedicated to maintaining the house, which the city is open to that conversation. We have a group of, staunch advocates for the house, which is fantastic. But we don't have a system in place to move forward really at this point. So to my knowledge, there's been no groundswell around, creating that separate organization and really investing. And I know that there's a lot of folks who, to Denise's point, would give to the house and give to make sure that it is a facility that could be used in the future. I just don't know for a fact what that, if we were able to get $5,000-$10,000 to do the initial work, I would feel badly to have them invest their hard-earned money into a project that we don't have the additional $800,000 to make it a habitable, usable facility, and to have that money wasted.
I think your transparency has helped that along, though. I mean, I think if it's important to them and they can get the private help with the understanding that there is no guarantee we're going to come in and finish it, then I think that's fair. And I know there's no one, at least from what I've heard, blocking the the citizens from doing this, but I would go one step further and encourage the city and urge the commission to, anytime private entities want to come in and do anything, let them. Like, let's open those gates as wide as we can. You know, and I'm not suggesting this is the case, but let's make sure we don't create bureaucracy that hinders people from wanting to do good. I'd be willing to bet there's an electrician in the city of Oregon City that would just love to do some weekend work, and if he loves the house or she loves the house well enough, it may be to close to no cost. Just like citizens come in and paint, and they come in and they rake leaves, and they come in and they repair, and I think it's right along those same lines, and I would encourage that. And I would also say that the best projects usually are the ones where the city does not get involved very much. Like, just let it happen with the community and the citizens, and give them our blessing and encourage it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Phil, do you need anything more in terms of direction? No? Okay. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the Glen Oak Park Naming Committee recommendation.
Great. So, as you're aware, we are moving forward with a naming recommendation at the meeting tonight. We have engaged in a public process. Thus far, I sent you a memo last week to kind of detail the process that has happened to date. So as per our policy, naming of facilities in order to move forward, Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee creates a subcommittee. That subcommittee then sets a process for creating the name and putting forth a recommendation. The subcommittee is 2 members of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, the Parks Director, as well as the CIC staff liaison position, which is Christina Robertson Gardner from Planning. We met, in the spring of this year. What's that?
You forgot 2 more people.
Oh.
City Commissioner.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry.
So that group met in the spring. We decided a process and a timeline, which included public recommendations as well as doing a voting process. At that meeting, we also determined that we needed to add a couple more members to the group, which also included a city commissioner as well as a representative of the neighborhood association. So we did take on 2 additional members to that group. At the, May and June of this year, we conducted a naming recommendation process, of which we received 404 recommendations from the community. The subcommittee met again and whittled that down to 4 names. So Caulfield Creek Park, Wachino Park, Tyrone S. Woods Memorial Park, and Waldo Caulfield Memorial Park. So those 4 names were put out to a vote of the people. That happened during the months of August and September. We received 8,572 votes during that process. And the committee met again to review the votes and to make a formal recommendation to this group. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Sean to maybe talk a little bit about, as being one of the members of the group that was on the subcommittee, maybe talk a little bit about that, and if you want to kind of bring forth the name that we are recommending, and then we do have 1 member for public comment in the audience.
Sure. Well, I had the pleasure of serving on this, and I've served on every naming committee in the last 15 years, and I will tell you that the public process on this one was the best ever. We've seen some that, one park I saw probably 30 people in here ready to testify because we had it wrong. Other parks, nobody shows up and we just submit a name and it's done. But this one, just the amount of people, 8,500 votes and 400 suggestions is amazing. And then as a group, we looked at the results and there was no debate. It was 100% consensus too. So it makes me proud to be part of that process when everybody agrees. it was a simple decision. And so I would like to make the motion that we forward to the, well, should we do this now or after public testimony?
You can probably move forward with what the recommendation of the subcommittee is, and then we can receive public
So the
comment
subcommittee
before.
then unanimously recommended Tyrone S. Woods Memorial Park for this group to vote on tonight.
And Phil, did you get a chance to read Doug's email into the record for those who maybe didn't get a chance to see their emails today?
Yeah, so maybe we'll take the public comment, and then we'll have additional conversation as a group, and I will read Doug's email at that time as well.
Okay.
So just a quick question. What were the general numbers that came in for this 4?
Second place had approximate, should we be discussing this?
We've had internal conversation around this. So it was overwhelming in
Yeah, let's put
support.
that.
And so it was
Okay.
single digits for 3 and a vast majority for the other.
So no question. That's good.
Yeah. One of the things to go back to our meetings and our discussion was when TriMet, I guess, voted on the name for the new bridge in downtown Portland, was the fact that, yeah, they put it out for a vote and they recommended a name, but they never publicly came out and listed what the vote numbers were. And so we kind of took that mindset as using the vote as a guide, but not as our absolute. Now, the vote and our decision was the same, but it didn't necessarily need to be. And going back to the suggestions, I think it's probably worth noting that the first suggestion of the 400, the most commonly recommended name we did not go with. It was going to be used for the new police station.
Oh, yeah.
So, we did make some decisions like that that were interesting. We had twists along the way. That surprised me. Well, it didn't surprise me. It was an obvious answer, I think, to many citizens. And then yet the police department came out quickly and said, please don't do that for obvious reasons. And so we moved in a different direction.
Thank you. Okay, public comment.
So we have DJ Ruger give public comment.
Just take a minute of your time.
Sure.
You probably already know the VFW weighed in on this issue. DJ Ruger, past commander of VFW Post 1324, Oregon City, formerly known as Waldo Caulfield Post for 50 years. We made a tough decision. Do we look to the past and support Waldo Caulfield for this park? Or do we look to the future, our younger generation of veterans, recognize another son of Oregon City with the recognition he has due? And we decided, through a vote of all of the members of our post, to support Tyrone Woods Memorial Park. And we did support it. I think you can tell from the vote totals. We also said that the next time there's a park in Oregon City, we're going to support Waldo Caulfield. I wanted to say that to Doug, but he's not here, and to you, Karen. So if there's no questions, that's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, GT. Well, and I'm going to say my only concern is, well, let him read Doug's comments because I concur with Doug.
So Doug was unfortunately not able to be here this evening, but did ask that I pass along his words. So as he stated earlier, I will not be able to attend tonight's meeting and hear the recommendation from the park naming subcommittee, but I did want to give my opinion. I support the name Waldo Caulfield Memorial Park. The name represents a fallen soldier. The name, as I understand it, of family that homesteaded in the area, and the name of a watershed that contains the park. While there may be strong support for naming the park after Tyrone S. Woods, his name is highly visible in the memorial section of Highway 213. It is important to recognize those that have given their lives during wars outside of our memory, as well as within our memory.
Thank you.
And I don't, DJ lobbied me. I don't have a problem with the other name. I just think that, that is the Caulfield's property. It makes sense. We named John Storm Park after somebody who died in that park. Every other park has a name because some family member gave it to us or it's random. And we could come up with something else for Tyrone Woods too. So I'm still not going to concur, but I'm just one vote.
I also wanted to comment that I know that's how Wesley Lynn Park was named. It was after a member of that community in that area. That park was named after him. And I think that, I'm not sure what it's a subjective, at this point it can be subjective of the top 4 names. Is that how the naming committee came to that conclusion?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but the naming committee is putting forth that one name after meeting and following the process. And so my intention tonight was to make a motion and move that name forward. And I agree, there's been discussion about, kind of to DJ's comment about, we do have another park right on the heels of this one that would be.
Or we could reverse that. We could give this name to Caulfield for that land in that watershed that Doug had mentioned, where, it identifies it identifies the area more clearer.
I believe we're turning our back, though, on the public process if we do that, and that's the part for me. And frankly, part of my property that I own a small Christmas tree farm, is on the Caulfield plat. And so that was obviously my number one suggestion. I think when this first started, Karen and I talked about it. My opinion changed for the same reasons that DJ said. And in the very beginning, I had no idea. And I'm a member of the VFW as well. So I was there at that meeting. And I walked into the meeting that night not knowing what the best answer was. But on the other hand, I was proud coming out of it that there was a consensus and we were all going to get behind something. And same way with this, I believe it's really important to follow the public process through. I think it's much harder to come back. I would not want to be a representative of the people and go a totally different direction than what we've been advised.
Is it totally different? That's what didn't Caulfield come in second place?
Yes.
And so how is it totally different?
I'm not even sure. Caulfield, I think Wachino came in second.
Yeah, it was overwhelmingly in support of Tyrone S. Woods Memorial Park. The other ones were we're talking around it. I'll just say the numbers. It was over 90% voted for in favor of Tyrone S. Woods Park. Wachino Park and Caulfield Creek Park were both around 3%, and the Waldo Caulfield Memorial Park was under 1% of the public vote.
It was 4th place. So
not to minimize, I just wanted to kind of weigh in. I appreciate the memorial on 213 and not to minimize it in any way, but you drive by that going 60, 65 miles an hour, especially the younger folks, they don't pay attention. And I think the proximity of this park by the high school, the younger generation, to DJ's point, is going to question that. Who is this person? And it affords the opportunity to tell that story and the service to the country and the sacrifice.
I would like to honor the public, what they voted for.
So I'll make a motion that the Park and Recreation Advisory Committee forward onto the City Commission the formal name of Tyrone S. Woods Memorial Park for the property on Glen Oak Road.
Second.
Since we have time for discussion, can I make a comment? Is that okay?
Go ahead.
And I want to preface this a little bit so it's understood that my comment does not come from sour grapes. I voted for Tyrone Woods as the name, and I'm very pleased with the decision. That being said, my caution is that it is my understanding through, I guess, public comments, not formally in a meeting, but outside, that there were many who voted that are not part of the Oregon City community. Mm-hmm. And that's a little concerning to me. Not that we don't want their input, we certainly do, but as a equal vote to those who live in this community, that bothers me. And so if we can somehow, and I don't know how, extrapolate that or prevent that in the future, I would advise we do so to get some more real results. And that's why I wanted to preface it. I don't come to say this was a wrong decision and here's why. I'm pleased with the decision. But I think we, to Sean's point, need to honor the public process, and the public process needs to be of those in Oregon City. Now, with 90% voting, let's assume 70% of them were not in Oregon City, and it's still a first place vote. So maybe that's irrelevant this time, and I'm happy with the decision. So.
Well, and I may give a sermonette here, and DJ, you may have swayed me. At the bottom of this, we have two gentlemen who has, as young men, gave their life in battle. They are two among quite a few young men raised in Oregon City, educated here, who have given their lives in service. I've just found 9 lately at Mountain View Cemetery in World War I, and I think 10 more that are buried in France. So one of the things on our deferred maintenance that I'm committed to finding grant money for is redoing the Memorial Plaza up at the cemetery, because we have been very neglectful identifying the young men of this community, and someday a woman, who gave their life in battle. So, you know, Tyrone is as deserving of honor as Waldo. It's just, I had the connection to its grandma and grandpa's property. But they are equally deserving of recognition.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
You have to go back.
Yes.
Just to reiterate, it was a very hard decision for us to make which way to go. We had one foot in the past, but we're looking to the future. Thank you all so much.
Again, remember the VFW Plus used to be called Waldo Caulfield.
Yeah.
So to me, I thought that was I thought that was the slam dunk answer
And you can always go back to
in the beginning. So it was interesting for myself to go through the process and be swayed. And to be honest, what I didn't say was 3 years ago, I had a meeting with the police chief, and I thought I was going to get in front of this whole thing. And my sole purpose for that meeting was to talk about naming that property after Robert Lipke. And I really got to know the police chief that day, but he was dead set on no. And I walked out of that place completely shocked, but in agreement. So kind of full disclosure, I've been thinking about this thing for years. I was the chair of PRAC when we purchased the property in 2007. So it's kind of been something, you know, I wanted to see it start to finish. Sure. So.
Okay, any other discussion? We have a motion and a second.
We do. So first by Sean, seconded by Lisa. We will take roll. Daniels?
I abstain.
Bollinger?
Aye.
Novak?
Aye.
Cook?
Aye.
Dashler?
Aye.
Maury?
I
Vallertais?
Aye.
And motion passes.
now help me find money for
So the recommendation will move forward to the City Commission at the December 5th regular meeting. By resolution at that meeting, that will again be open for public comment, and it is assumed that they will move forward hopefully with the recommendation of this group.
Great. Okay. Would you like to say a few words? Sure. Come on up.
Wasn't planning on saying anything.
That's okay.
As long as it's all right.
Thank you for joining us.
I'm Cheryl Croft Bennett, and I'm the mother of Tyrone. And listening to your comments, I'm in full understanding. I did not know about Waldo Caulfield, and I've lived here for 33 years in the same house. about a mile from where the park will be. And so I'm a history buff, and so I went scurrying to the internet to look up Waldo and see who this man was. And Karen, you're absolutely correct. We have many heroes here from Oregon City. We have the Larry Dahl Memorial over in the Circle of Honor, which the VFW took out of that atrocious corner where it sat in the weeds and the vines and everything for so long. Waldo was a hero, 25 years old, gave his life on October 2nd, 1918 in France at the Battle of the Meuse Argonne. And I looked for a photo of him. I wanted to see what this hero looked like. And where did I find the photo? Not on the internet. Found a large photo in the VFW hall hanging up. So I fully and completely understand why you would want to honor this great man. We forget about our World War I heroes. That was an atrocious war. It was a horrible war. And I don't know that we really do a great job of teaching our youngsters about it. I'm a former high school English teacher, so I value education and especially history. But I'm honored and I'm humbled and I feel privileged to be able to live in this community, so many good-hearted people who recognize that my son was a hero. It took me a while to be able to say those words because I wasn't raised that way. And I certainly didn't raise my children to think that they were anything special or better than anyone else. They were just raised to be the best of whatever it was they chose to do, to be the very best and do their best. And my son did. And I'm very proud of him. So I thank you all for sharing your thoughts and for nominating my son for this great honor. And I'm very grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our rep Park.
So just a quick update, really quick on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. The RFP for design or for architectural services and engineering services is currently open and closes on November 20th. So it's anticipated that they will hire a firm to kind of walk us through the initial design work to get us to construction drawings and the permitting process. So that's ongoing right now. Anticipated to have them on board sometime early in the new year, and then to move forward with the process. It's currently part of the joint permit application process. So I can see giving me a little bit of a confused look. So
I've got a question.
So part of the JPA, they asked for additional information. So we started to move forward with this design contract so that we could get to a level of certainty so that they could give appropriate comments and be able to move forward to a signed joint permit application through the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of State Lands.
So all the beautiful drawings I went down to OMSI and saw, are those just concept drawings? They're not detailed enough? Okay.
Correct. Yep.
But this is staying with that
Correct.
as
Yeah.
the framework.
So that's the framework of the design. They will be moving forward again with the phase 1 design work, which will be the prominent view of the falls from Mill H, and then the access from the interim parking area along Main Street, and some selective demolition of the yard space and interim use of that space as well.
Okay.
I have a small, well, not such a small question, but access to that site is part of this project, of course, crossing 99 specifically.
Yeah.
So at what point in time does that come into play when they start moving forward with actually constructing, reconstructing or constructing buildings across. I mean, is that part of your domain, shall I say, or at least is that outside the walls of
No, there's probably going to be some improvements made along 99E and Main Street that will allow for better access into the property. As you said, it's it's a state highway. It's a difficult area to get to. Some of it will be down to just timing of lights to allow for enough time for pedestrians. There's requirements for, it's a main shipping route, so it's requirements for ODOT has in place for not enough closure time, I guess, as it were, along 99. So they need to keep within certain times for certain periods, particularly as during rush hour timeframes. And part of the work that's happened to date has been around alternate modes of transportation demand management plan in place to allow for different modes of transportation to get to the properties. A lot of people ask about, when is the parking garage going to be put in place? Well, that's not the first thing that's going to happen. There will be a lot on site, but there will be, a lot of need to talk about alternate modes of transportation, including crossing by pedestrian route across 99E into the site. So some of those things will be happening, probably not until future phases. So probably looking at a phase 2 or further down the line. So for the phase 1, it's primarily the frontage access into the interim parking lot, the Main Street corridor, and then the prominent view of the falls kind of starting further out on the site.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now Lottery Park.
Great. So I'm going to give a very short visual presentation on Ladderette Park. So the first photo you will see here, hopefully not just me on the screen.
Smile.
Can we get the secondary picture on our screens?
We can actually see the presentation.
So for those in the viewing audience and at home,
I'll stick with my picture.
so we have a very nice picture of the work that happened during the e-payment event, which includes members of our group as well as I'll just move on. As well as a member of our audience. Denise is in there as well. Great picture. Next photo that I'm going to show you is the concept design for Ladderette Park, which was done with Greenworks. So as you're aware, we did a lot of public process with the National Park Service to get public comment on what the, oh, there it goes, great. So we did a lot of public process to determine what is the highest and best use of this property. We worked closely with Greenworks to refine the public comment that we heard back, and working on the final version that you see here, the conceptual design. So it shows the basketball courts, the nature play area, which will be on the upper lot here to the right-hand side of the image over in this area. The main reason that we are doing a lot of this work and why it became a larger project is that in order to get to this upper area, we need to have ADA accessibility all the way through. So we have a ramp coming up and into the play area, which is really important. We also have a walking path around the outside of the play area and a slide coming down into the play area over here. On the next slide, we have some precedent images that are anticipated to be built out on the site. It'll have some native plantings as well as some climbing structures. It's anticipated to have a couple of large swings on the site, as well as the slide that we talked about. The reason why I'm bringing this forward at this time is that we were successful working with the core group, Ladderette Park core group, to acquire funds through the enhancement grant. We're using those funds for to move forward with construction documents. And so we have been in talks with Greenworks to move forward with those construction documents and are anticipating getting back a scope of work in the next week or so. So over the next couple of months, we'll begin the work of designing the construction documents so that we have a shovel-ready project to move forward. The core group is continuing to try to find grant funding mechanisms possible in order to make this project feasible so that we can open it up sooner than later. So we'll, I'm assuming, have regular updates on this as we move forward in the coming couple of months.
Great. Okay. Memorial Bench Program.
So this was an agenda item in the last month, and we moved it back to this month because of lack of time. But just wanted to give an update on our Memorial Bench Program and allow probably a little bit of comment, but primarily just like to digest kind of where we're at and next steps. More than likely, we'll be coming back in December to ask you to kind of move forward with our recommendation and then progress it to the City Commission for adoption, hopefully so that we have a Memorial Bench Program in place. So to give a little background, current practice about the program, we don't have a policy or a formalized procedure, but we do have a general practice that we use for memorial benches. We currently have no set price for memorial benches. We kind of do a lot of legwork on looking at the site, looking at what it's going to cost, trying to give a rough estimate to the person who's looking to install the memorial, coming back, getting an okay, then going out and doing the work, and then giving back an invoice and saying this is what it cost. And it's just a lot of work and a lot of staff time, and it's difficult for both staff as well as for the general public when they want to come forward and bring information to us to try to install a memorial bench in one of our parks. So we're not tracking needs in our parks or placements for future benches, so we don't have an identified location in each park of these are the areas where we should have benches and make the most sense for this park. We would like to have that process where we have identified where the needs are in each of our parks. So if someone says, I would like to donate a bench at X park, we can say, great, we have two options available for you. We have a bench here or a bench here that you could install. And it's very clear process. They can make that decision. We know that it's vetted and we know that it's a need for the system and not just a nice thing to recognize a family member or friend of the person coming to us. We also have no agreement for a length of memorial recognition or maintenance needs. So, there's a limited life cycle replacement for a bench. A bench could last 8 to 10 years is kind of where you see that timeline for replacement. A lot of agencies have a 10-year as kind of their cap. And so they'll have a memorial bench program for 10 years. You can make a memorial for your loved one, but after 10 years, the plaque will be removed. Some give them back to the families. Some just say, we will offer them to you, and if you don't want it, then it will be surplus. Some say, if the plaque is damaged or is no longer legible, then we will give you the option to re-up and do another memorial bench, or you will have the option to take that, or, it's many different areas and many different ways to look at it. There's a couple different ways that we could do it. And again, we're just kind of giving you information so we can start the conversation and come back at a later point with a formalized recommendation. So at this point, we currently have new installation of benches on hold. So we're currently not installing memorial benches. We have a handful of folks that have reached out to us that it would like to put in a memorial bench. And at this point, we have them on hold, we have them on a wait list, and we will contact them as soon as we have a process in place. It's not it's not super expensive, in the grand scheme of things to replace a bench, but when we're looking at, long-term memorializing, having to buy replacement plaques for specific individuals, having to make sure that we are maintaining a specific bench for someone, it is a little bit of a process. So again, the challenge, we have no standardization. We also have to look at not over memorializing parks. That's also something that's looked at industry-wide is, they are parks and meant for open space enjoyment. When you have signs every couple of feet in a park, it kind of takes away from the natural enjoyment of the space. We also have no maintenance agreement in place. And so, who is responsible for replacing damaged pieces or after a certain amount of time? Should it be the city? Should it be the individual? Should we have a limited amount of time, or should it be into perpetuity? We're only going to recognize memorial benches once they're gone, and if they're all gone in a 10-year period at one specific park, then we only have memorials recognized during that set 10-year period. Those are things to take into consideration.
About ones currently in place, which is a number of them, how do you know what that 10-year cycle, how does that start from year one when you recognize you're starting this policy, and one that's been there obviously for 10 or 15 years?
Yeah.
But again, they get another 10 years.
That's part of the conversation.
Yeah,
is like the ones that are in place, do we grandfather them in? Do we say you have 10 years starting today, is the new policy is adopted, you will have a 10-year period where we will continue to maintain it. And then after that 10 years, then, you will have the option to re-up for that bench, knowing that we're going to have to replace it, or you can choose not to. Those are things to consider that we'll have to move forward with. And I can bring forward in the next meeting probably some recommendation, and we can kind of look at ways that different organizations do things. So as an example, I have a couple of properties that we have memorial benches currently at and benches currently at. So Kenema Children's Park, we have 4 benches currently in this park. We have 1 memorial bench, and we have 3 regular benches. The memorial bench is probably one of our newer ones. I think it was installed in the last year or so.
What's a rough cost for one? I mean,
looking at probably around $2,000, $2,500.
That includes like a concrete pad.
Okay. So includes the pad, includes the bench, includes the plaque.
You're building in your maintenance costs on those benches.
Yeah. So the out-of-pocket straight cost, depends on the type of bench that you're purchasing and the type of plaque that you're using. And in all honesty, the pad, if it's required, or if you don't need one. But yeah, it's, wanting to build in at least a little bit of funds for the ongoing operation and maintenance of that bench. Chapin Park is our most memorialized park in our system. We have 3 benches that are not memorialized, and we have 12 benches that are. Of the benches that are, we have quite a few different styles. In each bench looks a little bit different. Some of the plaques are different. Some of them have engraving on the entirety of the back of the bench with a router. Other ones are little, small plaques that you get engraved, like you might see on the front of like a trophy or something, very small engraving. Others are, good chunk of, a plaque that you might see at, at a large formal memorial. So Chapin Park is an example. We only have 3 benches that in theory could be made into memorial bench sites, but after that we would be out of memorial space. Ellendale Park has 2 tree memorials, only has 1 bench memorial, which is a little bit of a newer memorial, and 13 current benches in the park. This site, we have an individual who'd like to donate 2 benches for memorial currently, who's on our wait list. So that'd be 2 additional benches on the site and not in the current bench locations.
Do you have a policy on memorial trees?
We don't, and I think my policy on memorial trees is that I would not recommend having memorial trees. It's a difficult policy. It's something that's alive. It's to have a memorial plaque in a location that, one, doesn't interfere with the root system, or two, doesn't get hit by a mower, or three, doesn't get buried by the grass and other things around it. It's a difficult proposition, and something that a lot of agencies are no longer doing.
So are you discouraging, or are you discouraging them?
I'm discouraging them, yes. And something that we haven't accepted in my time here. We have done a couple of memorial benches, but we have not done any memorial trees, and something that I wouldn't recommend, and that our park maintenance manager also would not recommend. So we have a little bit of a to-do list. So we're going to we have done some research on best practices, but we'll continue to do some best practice research across the industry. We're going to come back at a new meeting coming up, whether it's December or January, to make a formal recommendation to continue the conversation. Anything that we do, we want to make sure that it's supported by the community as a whole, and supported by the commission, as well as PRAC, obviously. So want to make sure that we have a full vetted process, and that we allow some public comment, and we allow that to kind of play out. So we'll be bringing those back. Hopefully we'll have a good discussion. Hopefully you'll have a little bit of time to digest the information that we've provided and try to think of best ways that we could approach this.
Well, you have this photo on. This is something that Larry Potter at the time took the advice from others in the Portland Park system. There's a reason for that middle railing there. So people can't sleep on the bench all day long and all night long.
Yeah.
And so it's been functional as well as an added amenity.
Yeah.
Well, and there's more benches than you showed us in the slideshow, and interestingly, they've all been donated by the Oregon City Women's Club.
There's more benches.
There's one at the top part, two at the library.
Oh yeah, we haven't done a full inventory yet.
But we just paid a year or 2 years ago to restore the three at the cemetery. So when you're looking at policies, particularly when it's a club or an organization, maybe built in. We'll come back to you in 10 years to tell you what needs to be painted and replaced.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking
Because we just took it on ourselves to repair the ones at the cemetery.
Yeah.
We put it on a Boy Scout, but we paid him.
Yeah, we have quite a few that were donated by the Women's Club. We have Rotary have donated a few. There's quite a few organizational donations as well. Yeah. So yeah, we'll come back with a full list of, we have this many, this is, if we were to do every 10 years, the cost would be this much. We'll have all that data for you. This is just an opportunity to kind of hear where we're at, initiate the conversation. We do have one person for public comment, Denise McGriff.
Hello again, different hat. I am the treasurer for the state of Oregon's second oldest historic preservation organization, the McLaughlin Memorial Association. We are only succeeded in that time frame by the Oregon Historical Society. They're slightly older. We are the second one. I want to urge you to support creating a program. The McLaughlin Memorial Association is interested in replacing a bench in McLaughlin Park as a memorial. We have funds available. We're not in a big hurry because we had to take time to talk to the people who've donated all the money and the families on what they wanted. And I can tell you that has not been an easy process because everybody said, well, we want this, well, no. And then anyway, we finally got some agreement that replacing that bench might be the solution that will meet everyone's needs. And we have some former members, all Oregon City residents, and I think all but maybe one of them might have been members of the Oregon City Women's Club, which is kind of fun in a way too, because we've got double duty. But anyway, so I just want to urge you to create some sort of a program so it's formalized. We look forward to working to get something done in maybe the next year, which would be kind of cool. And I think also you might add in that the bench kind of needs to fit the setting. Obviously, as you are aware, I'm very concerned about things that go into the McLaughlin Conservation District, and we would probably not want a really modern, super fancy bench, but the one that you had on the slide might be more appropriate for the neighborhood. And right now, we do have people sleeping on that bench at the head of the going down the stairs to the elevator. So something else might be a little more appropriate, but a lot of people do sit there, and it's nice. Unfortunately, we had one that was over by the cannon that we had to request be taken out because it was becoming a, let me say politically correctly, an attractive nuisance. So we had to have that one removed. It was not visible from the street, and there were just tons of problems that were going on with that. And it was also in really super bad shape, but there's no pad there. It was just set in the ground. This one has a pad. So I would urge you on behalf of the association to continue to move this forward, and we look forward to giving the city some money so we can get a bench put there. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you. Any other comments?
You know, I think this is a great program. I would encourage, as you come back with recommendations, that we don't overthink this. We don't make it too difficult, simply because they're benches. And I can appreciate clear understanding and boundaries as to how things are going to be handled. I mean, that's important. Along with that, this is a great opportunity for members of the community to take ownership in a park or a part of a park. And if we make it difficult and if we make it expensive, they're not going to do that. And so I would encourage the cost to be minimal and only the cost of the bench and the pad and the installation or the plaque, not the maintenance, because if there's a bench there and it's not memorialized, we're maintaining it anyway. So let's have them cover the costs of the memorial piece and we'll take care of the rest. And hopefully that will encourage more of this and more community involvement and more community ownership, which I think is a bigger benefit to us than a couple extra bucks.
Good point.
Well, and I will say the last bench that we put in, I honestly took a ridiculous amount of time to get done and way too much need for staff contact.
Yeah.
And if you had a brochure and a form and here's the check, here's the form, it would be so much nicer.
Yeah. And that's our goal, is to streamline the process, minimize staff time, minimize the amount of frustration for the public, and make sure that we have a process well into the future that we know we can depend on.
Other general business?
None on this end.
Okay, member reports, Mr. Bill.
I have none.
I have none.
I attended the Waterbork Ivy Poll last Saturday, and I think it was a success. I think we did well, maybe 20, 25 trees amongst us. It was well attended. The weather was beautiful, and we're coming along there. Good progress.
So I've got 2 months to stand on the soapbox before I'm on term limits, and I'm going to bring the same thing up twice because it's eaten at me a little bit the last couple meetings. But I had a discussion with a fellow PrAC member about a month ago, and they said they lived about 10, 12 blocks from the nearest park, and I thought I lived about a mile from a park, and so I looked it up, and I live 2.3 miles from the nearest park, and I live in the city limits. And after hopefully Tyrone S. Woods Memorial Park is built, I will only live 3/4 of a mile from a park. So just give you an idea of how far the parks are for some people. And as we say on the board, next month, we're all going to interview new candidates. And it's extremely important to me that we all remember we're representing everybody in the city. When I got on this board, it was because I lived 30 feet from a city park. And so that was going to be built. So I wanted to be able to influence it. And it was a very narrow way of thinking, but it got me involved in this. And then I quickly learned there's so much more. So, I encourage everybody here to pick an area, outside of their neighborhood, learn the needs. Last month afterwards, standing out in the parking lot, I had a conversation with Jesse Buss and Cameron from the McLaughlin neighborhood. And I talked with them about advocating for other parts of the city. My neighborhood association, for all intents and purposes, doesn't do much compared to a neighborhood like McLaughlin, which, in a sense, is, I envy some of their efforts for parks, for maintenance. But our conversation was interesting, and Cameron, I believe, was intrigued by it. My challenge to him was to pick some of those other areas and help maybe some of those groups or communities learn to advocate for what's going on there. Kenema has done very well, McLaughlin's done very well, but right now the most underserved area of the city is exactly where this new park should go, but it's been deficient for 15 years. And so for me, watching the process is sad and exciting at the same time that it's taken so long. How many meetings has Tom been to trying to advocate for his community? It's the same kind of thing, and we just need to remember that. So my challenge to you, and I'll bring it up again next month, is pick an area outside of your own neighborhood, learn what the needs are, and kind of help push them, because we have rules as to how many people can be on from a neighborhood. So clearly there are some neighborhoods that have zero representation here, even though others aren't very strong, because I think we can have no more than 2. Mm-hmm. So nobody gets too powerful, if you will. But nevertheless, unless we had 15 spots, some are completely unrepresented. So that's just my comment.
Very good. Nothing?
Okay, Pioneer Center updates. The homeless issue is becoming a bigger issue for the Pioneer Center. The outdoor temperatures are getting colder, so people using the grounds are using the grounds for both sleeping and bathroom as a bathroom site. 2 fundraisers are in full swing: wreath sales, candy sales, and the Giving Tree will be put up in a few weeks. 3, we're working with the city finance to figure out how to get the funds to replace the ballroom floor. 4, Medicare seminars are in full swing, and we are working on energy assistance for low-income people. We've already discussed the Ivy Post, so that's all I have.
Great.
Thank you for everyone that came.
I don't have anything to report out, but kind of tailgating on Sean's comment, I would ask that when we do have the listed applicants come forward, can we get a kind of a mapping of where, obviously we'll know what neighborhood association they're associated with, but also the ones that we don't have applicants for, or I'd like to kind of get a feel for what we're lacking in terms of representation on this committee.
Yeah.
When are those due?
They were due on October 12th.
Okay.
Although one of the things I was going to talk about during the staff reports is that we will probably be extending the PrAC group. It's my understanding that the city recorder said we did not receive a strong showing for PrAC. So if anyone is interested in serving on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, or if anyone on this group knows of somebody who they think would be a good fit for this board, we would definitely appreciate reaching out and having them apply online or contact me if they have additional questions.
Is there any way to proactively reach out to the neighborhood associations to say, here's your opportunity?
CIC.
Especially those that we've never seen somebody represented on?
Yeah.
If I can, I've literally been thinking about this a lot. I absolutely don't want to leave PrAC, and I'm out on term limits. And our policy is 6 years. It's a policy that it hasn't been adjusted for about 10 years, but my first 5 or 6, we used to adjust it every other year, because one year we'd have 5 applicants, or 5 total, and we'd have 7, and now we're at 9 and normally filling it. But I would absolutely like to serve again if you guys would consider, asking the mayor, making a motion to extend it and make an exception. So if that is your wish, I would absolutely love to stay.
And if we don't get enough applications, maybe that would be a reason to do that.
So what's the process? Would he submit an application and then if chosen, ask for the exception, or ask for the exception so that he can submit an application? Like how does that work?
Okay, since this is being recorded, I don't want to be too devious, but.
No, we don't want to be devious at all, but I'm just saying, do we ask, do we have to get the exception before an application be accepted? Or do we make the exception because of an applicant? I mean, how does that?
Normally, you're going to do your interviews, and if there's not enough, if there's 4 openings and only 3 people interview, after the first of the year and the mayoral appointments are made, your chair can ask if you want to recommend someone to fill that position.
Yeah, but that's a different process. I'm talking about the process to be considered as an applicant.
Oh, to be really, I thought you were saving Sean.
Yeah.
No, I'm just.
So anyone, the website's currently open. Anybody can click on the link right now at this point to apply online. It did technically close on the 12th, although I think that the city recorder has currently held it open. So anybody in the general public who's interested in serving can go and apply online. Typically as a group, we would have, dozens and dozens of people who would apply and want to serve. And then this group would do interviews during our December meeting. So we have on our schedule, December 6th is our next meeting. 6 o'clock would be a work session to interview applicants, and then 7 o'clock for our regular meeting. At this point, that is still the plan, and we'll kind of play it out and see what happens. So if you could please reserve the 6 o'clock time on your schedule. I will continue to update the group through email what the applicant pool looks like, and what type of interview process we will have.
Okay. One thing is how Doug Neely, so how many of you were here when we reappointed Doug? So Doug was the mayor, and we had 3 applicants for 3 spots. And so at our December meeting, we forwarded those 3 applicants, and we actually said something along the lines of, because I made the motion, that if for any reason any of the applicants has to withdraw or chooses not to accept their nomination, then we would like to extend an invitation to Doug Neely, to the former mayor, to fill that vacant position. 7 days later, one of the people withdrew, and that's how Doug got on the board. He was very honored, and I think we were all very pleased to have him. But that's how that happened. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Were there other, on the side, besides PrAC not having enough applications, was that true for planning, for example? They had 4 vacancies too, I recall.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay, it was just PrAC that you're aware of.
Yeah.
Were the only ones that were extended?
All of the committee applications.
Good question.
Recreation report.
So the recreation report you received through email from Denise Conrad. Park Place water line replacement update. So just give an update on the Park Place water line. Again, they're replacing the water line on Cleveland Street in Hiram. They are planning to move forward. They're doing a lot of I think they've moved a couple of the trees currently, and they should be complete with that project within the next month or so. They're planning on being completed by the month of December. So it is a little bit longer period than we originally thought, but they're still planning to move forward and have all of those large pipes that are currently in the footprint of the park should be in the ground very shortly.
A comment on kind of off the recreation report. I was talking to Denise last week when I came down for Martin's farewell party and getting more detail on what all's been done at the pool during the shutdown.
Oh, yeah.
The underwater lights had not worked for...
years.
Yeah, years and years, and were a shock hazard, basically. And they've been completely replaced. They're safe, won't electrocute anybody. But, thank you. That's a piece of deferred maintenance that got taken off the top of the list. But, talk about a safety concern.
Yeah.
So, but I was really impressed at what all she was telling me got done during the closure.
Yeah, rather substantial. And we probably can give a formal update to the group on that as well at the next meeting.
I think it'd be interesting.
One more thing that I didn't realize is, and mind you, I thought I was fairly social media savvy, but I didn't know that the Park and Recreation Department had their own Facebook page until somewhere in this last month. And so I've been watching a lot of the pool pictures, and it's been kind of nice to watch that. I followed the Parks Foundation and I followed the city, but I didn't know the Parks Department had one. So maybe it's because of the new communication person pushing it that I saw it as a suggestion. But
We also have an Instagram page, so if you
I don't do that. That's
Friends of the Cemetery have a page too.
Future agenda items?
I assume, I ask this every time, that Clackamat Park will someday show up on our agenda. And I know that we've got some issues with a bridge being possibly built in that park, or maybe not. It's the first go around. Is that, and it's also part of our master planning that we decide whether it becomes a charter park or not.
Yes, so it is still in the plan. We still have funding for it. We still plan on moving forward. We have a draft version. We've just not put it out yet. So it will be done shortly. And again, I apologize for the timing. It's amounting to staff time to finish that process.
Is the boat ramp the first thing we'll try to tackle when we get to that planning
The
process?
boat ramp is part of it. So the boat ramp, the RV park, the property across the street, which is the overflow parking. Yep.
Any other items?
I'd like to see us pick up where Bill was talking about earlier and address the name of the boat launch and parking area that we typically call Sportcraft. I'd like to see that addressed sooner than later. I think there's probably some consensus as doing something. Every time we use a commercial name for private, or a commercial name for a park space, it always bugs me. I think we could rename it, but really you're renaming a ramp in a parking lot. Or the other logical one to me would be to extend the boundary of John Storm Park and just make it a bigger park.
I think that makes
And
sense.
so
When we can get under the bridge.
yeah. So I think doing something like that would be probably a simple gesture, but it would make a lot of sense.
I couldn't even name us all these 50 people there.
Okay, we can bring that up at a future meeting, depending on how full the agendas are.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other items? Okay, next meeting is December 6th. We'll assume that we have a work session ahead of that, 6 p.m. And if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn.